MS Now senior Washington reporter Eugene Daniels. He's also the co-host of The Weekend, working one day early. And Susan Page, Washington bureau chief for USA Today. She is always working. So, Eugene, if we start, Bondi seemed to do whatever the president asked. We all remember the Dear Pam Truth Social post. We know that she was someone who really strained what the role of DOJ had been in the past, which is its own independent agency. Trump writing public letters to her about who he wants her to prosecute. And yet, all of that wasn't enough.
Because he's operating in a world that doesn't exist, right? He is operating in a world where the White House, the administration, the DOJ can go after whoever the president believes that has wronged him and send that person to jail. That's not the world that we live in this country. That is a good thing. I think most of us would probably agree. But he wants everyone to operate in his world. And so when you look at someone like Pam Bondi, who was completely loyal to Donald Trump from the very beginning, right? Someone who was an impeachment lawyer for him. This is someone who probably the next level of her career is not going to be what it could have been had she not taken this job, right? And I don't think she did herself any favors in the legal community. And yet he got rid of her. Donald Trump wants someone to be loyal and effective in his head, right? She was effective. A lot of these things went to judges. A lot of these things that he was upset with, these folks went to grand juries. That's where it stopped because the judges and the grand juries said there's no case here. And so depending on who he puts in that position, are they going to be more effective in his eyes? Probably not, because it's not a question of whether or not she was creative enough with the law. It is a question of whether or not the things that he was asking her to do were legal to begin with.
And yet it doesn't exactly matter. It matters from the court of law perspective, right? And yet he is the president. He will pick her successor. And you have to imagine that the changes she's already enacted within DOJ are not just going to be flipped off like switching a light switch. In fact, whoever comes next is going to have to live in the reality that Trump wants them to live in if they'd like to keep their jobs.
Well, it's a different Justice Department now than when she took over. And I think that part President Trump likes, the expulsion of people who worked on the cases against him, for instance. But the dilemma they'll have is clearly loyalty itself is not enough. You have to deliver on things that are hard to deliver on. A hard line for the next attorney general to walk. And if you look back at Trump's history with his attorney generals, he doesn't end up liking any of them.
He doesn't end up liking any of them. I mean, Jeff Sessions, it was over for him before it even began in that first administration. But when you look at who might come next, and they all have a blueprint for how this is supposed to go now, right? Both from the first admin and certainly what Pam Bondi went through. When you see the names that we have up on the screen, everyone from Lee Zeldin to Jeanine Pirro, who's apparently pitching herself, Senator Eric Schmidt, Alina Habba, who was disqualified from serving as U.S. Attorney for New Jersey, and yet was potentially in the Oval recently, if not today. She's been tweeting a picture that it's always an honor to be there. Like, what do you make of the list?
I think the list doesn't matter because at the end of the day, Donald Trump has changed the way that DOJ operates. There is no more independence, so he can put anyone there. And the only goal for him is they do what he says, right? So Lee Zeldin is someone who seems like he's been kind of wanting out at the EPA. It doesn't seem like the most interesting job for someone who's probably a lawyer and maybe doesn't care that much about the issues that they're working on. He's pitching himself. Todd Blanche, the acting attorney general, is also apparently pitching himself. So these folks are going to the president and saying yes. Todd Blanche, a lot of folks I talked to yesterday who are in the DOJ, say he has a good relationship with Donald Trump, right? He is a personal lawyer for Donald Trump. He is one of the reasons that the 34 charges against Donald Trump, there was nothing that happened after that. Like, all of these things, so he, in Donald Trump's eyes, is very close to him and will do everything. But again, at the end of the day, Donald Trump is asking whoever this person is to do impossible tasks, and more importantly, to operate in a world that doesn't exist. And I think any of those folks are going to continue to have issues. I mean, Jeanine Pirro in D.C., like, they're having trouble indicting the salami sandwich, to be fair.
Guy.
Salami
guy.
Thrower
of sandwich guy.
But, like, so it's like all of these folks and the ways in which Donald Trump wants an attorney general, anybody that works in the DOJ for him to operate, it is difficult to do so because there are bounds, luckily, with the law.
Yeah, so they are all in some ways being set up to fail.
Exactly.
But Susan, I think Bondi's exit comes less than a month after fired DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, and The Atlantic is sort of begging this larger question of, is this a bigger shakeup? They write Trump had, quote, been reluctant to get rid of any of his top lieutenants, viewing firings as a concession to Democrats in the media. Even in the past few months, there had been an edict that no cabinet official would be removed prior to the midterms, though a series of dismissals were planned for after Election Day. But then you see Noem go out the door. and then you see Bondi. And there are questions about, is it Kash Patel? Lori Chavez-DeRemer over at Labor has a slew of scandals, including but not limited to the fact that her husband is facing sexual assault allegations from staffers in the building. I mean, there is no shortage of reason to potentially do turnover. And yet it begs the question of what might come next, and is the second iteration of it any less controversial?
You know, there's another factor that's pushing early turnover as opposed to waiting till after the midterm election, and that is the prospect of getting Senate confirmation for whoever he chooses for these jobs, including the Attorney General job.
Yes.
You know, the Republicans have the narrowest of majorities there. After the midterms, they are likely to have a smaller majority in the Senate or even be in the minority. That may be one factor that spurs the president to try to do some turnover very soon.
Very soon. And I also am thinking about the Senate confirmation piece of this, not just because it's me standing outside there covering that, but also because what worked with Markwayne Mullin was the fact that he had those existing relationships, and any skeptical Republican, including those who were worried about what was happening inside DHS under Noem, were like, we know this guy, he's going to come talk to Congress. And it makes me question if someone with Congress ties, say a Schmidt or potentially a Zeldin, is the answer to that question, though there's certainly more questions the White House is asking itself as they seek the next version of the Attorney General. Eugene Daniels and Susan Page, I could talk to you all day. Thank you. We will leave it there.